Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Paranormal and Cryptid Rabbit Holes. Hello there, Prospecting USA. And we got Walsus, yes, and Tammy Johnson. As everybody starts to slide in with D. Crosley and D. Worm, welcome everybody. Hopefully everybody's having a wonderful Thursday evening. And welcome back, Mr. Decker. Glad to have you back.
Good to be
How are
back,
you
guys.
doing?
I'm doing all right. Took a week off there. We had a death in the family, and I took a week off to spend some time with my families and just doing what we needed to do. But I am back and ready to go for a great show tonight.
I'm glad. Well, our hearts went out to you in prayers, and we're glad to have you back. So welcome
Thank
back,
you.
sir.
Thank you.
So
Great to be
Bigfoot
back.
urban legends. Huh?
Yes. Yes, right. And this is not something I ever really thought about before. But when I was preparing for my conference I did in the summer in Pennsylvania, my topic was, why do I believe in Bigfoot without ever having experiencing Bigfoot? And I had created this checklist of the reason why I believe. And one of those things is historical accounts is on my checklist. And I was looking up historical accounts for Bigfoot. And there's an account that I knew and everybody has heard of, and I put that down on my checklist. And the moment I started researching it, it kind of came up questionable. And I was like, wow, so I'm not going to use this for my speech, but I'm definitely going to have to come back and research this. So that's what I did. And the story is, and I know we've all heard it, anybody that's ever heard about Bigfoot has heard the earliest recorded account of Bigfoot was with Leif Erikson. When Leif Erikson first came to America in 986 AD. Supposedly, he wrote in his diary that him and his Norsemen encountered large hairy beast that the people claim is Bigfoot. So that's where this comes from. And as I started going down this rabbit hole, I realized not everything is as what it seems to be. And so that's what we're going to cover tonight is this urban legend that we all know. And I used to cite as fact as the oldest Bigfoot recorded, Bigfoot sightings recorded in history. So that's going to be our topic tonight. If anybody wants to chime in the audience, we'll put it up, ask for questions, and then we'll kind of go from there with it. Now, Grizzly, are you familiar with that story?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
That's well documented. Hello, Luna and Nada. Welcome to the show, Roger Blair.
Yeah.
It's well documented, and a
Sure.
lot of people forget to talk about it.
Right.
So, besides the biblical references,
sure. Do you know where that first hit the internet or when that very first came out? The idea of Leif Erikson recording this in his diary?
no, because
Okay.
that was so long ago. I do not.
Right. So the first instance that I found of it was on a blog for Sasquatch Chronicles. And the blog was dated April 28th of 2015. That was the earliest online reference that I could find specifically stating what the legend is. Okay. And then I have it written down here because I want to go through this step by step for you guys. So you can hear what's being said. You can hear specifically, so it's not just me saying it. And then we'll follow the research down all the way to the beginning, and we can see what's going on here. We can see why people are saying this, and then we can decide for ourselves if that's really what was said and what happened. All right. So from the Sasquatch Chronicles blog, April 28th, 2015, no author was mentioned. And this is a word for word account of what is written there. You can go back and look for it for yourself. It says the oldest account of Bigfoot was recorded in 986 AD by Leif Erikson and his men. During their first landing in the New World, the Norsemen wrote about man-like beasts that were horribly ugly, hairy, swarthy, and with great black eyes. Among his accounts, Leif told of seeing huge hairy men who towered over him and his men. The huge hairy men, according to Leif, lived in the woods and had a rank odor and a deafening shriek. It should be noted that Leif Erikson and his men described huge man-like beasts that were loud and foul-smelling and clearly distinct from the native peoples. Apparently, Leif had several sightings of these huge hairy men before departing the island. They called the creatures scale ring. People believe that the creature scale ring is what we know today as Bigfoot. This is the earliest recorded encounter with a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. The Norse word scaling is a term of contempt. It means, hold on, it means roughly a barbarian. And what is interesting is the word hairy. The Norse were a hairy people themselves, big men with matted hair and beards. Why did they remark in the scale ring being hairy? Was it because they were very much hairier than the Norsemen? Okay, and that is taken directly from the Sasquatch Chronicle blogs. Well, when I started looking at this, the first thing I thought of was Leif Erikson. What do we know about Leif Erikson? And did Leif Erikson really keep a diary? Because that's where this says this was recorded, was in a diary. Okay. Well, the first part that's a problem with this is Leif Erikson, it says, were recorded in 986 AD. That is the time where they believe Leif was born.
Right.
He did not. Mm-hmm.
My thing, I thought he was supposed to be alleged the first Norse explorer who was thought to have been the first European
Correct.
to set foot on the continent of North America.
Correct. And that is true.
Before Christopher Columbus.
Right. So the actual date of coming to the New World was actually about 1000 AD.
That is correct.
He was in his early 20s when he first got a ship. It was around, I believe, 1000 to 1011, somewhere in there AD, putting him in his early 20s, which means he would have been born approximately 986 AD, but the date of his birth is not recorded. So that's the first thing that is incorrect about this legend. So the date's completely wrong. But given the time frame, I mean, we have to allow some, interpretation of date because we don't know. The second thing I was looking at was, did Leif Erikson even have a diary? Because the main legend goes, Leif recorded this in his diary. Well,
the Norsemen didn't record things.
Correct. They had runic writing, which they recorded on stone tablets and different things like that. Leif was very well educated. He was not pagan. He was actually Christian. And he did, but they did oral accounts back then. Runes were for only very specific and very important things that they had to do, but it wasn't for writing a journal. So Leif Erikson never wrote a journal. The earliest records of written down are what they call the Vinland sagas, which is the saga of Greenland and the saga of Eric the Red, which is Leif Erikson's father. And that was written anywhere between the 13th and 14th centuries because they're two different sagas. So that's the earliest recordings we have. So all this stuff would have been carried down from oral tradition. Okay, which doesn't necessarily prove it faulty, but we know oral tradition, kind of expands and changes a little bit. So we have to kind of look at everything from there. So that's the first thing. And then I started trying to figure out, well, where were they getting this information from? Right. So I have this blog post, the earliest thing online, but they don't really reference anything. Right. They're not telling me where they got their information or anything like that. They did have some phrases highlighted or set off by quotation marks. So that kind of gave me a point to start. And eventually, what I found was a selection from Peter Byrne in his book, The Search for Bigfoot, Monster, Myth, or Man from the 1970s. Okay. So that blog post led me to this book. And it seems like the legend kind of started with Peter reading or writing this book in the 70s because he mentioned Eric the Red and Leif Erikson seeing these Bigfoot creatures. So then I went ahead and thanks to my friend Lori Copeland Wade, she sent me screenshots from her book of this exact book of what Peter Byrne actually wrote. Okay. So I got that written down for us so we can read exactly what Peter wrote, which led to this blog post and the assumption that Leif Erikson saw Bigfoot. Okay. And he said, did the bold Leif and his Norsemen encounter Bigfoot? It is possible. It is more probable that the creatures they encountered were simply Indians. The Norse word skellring is a term of contempt. It means roughly a barbarian. But what caught my eye when reading Samuel Eliot Morrison's account of the early Norse voyages was the word hairy. The Norse were a hairy people themselves, big men with matted hair and beards. Why did they remark on the skellrings being hairy? Was it because they were very much hairier than the Norsemen, even covered with hair, perhaps? So that's the excerpt from Peter's book talking about skellrings and Leif Erikson. Now, you probably heard some phrases in there that were the same wording and stuff as in the blog post, right? But what he's really talking about is the creatures that they saw were described as hairy. And his whole assumption is, well, if we think Norsemen were hairy, but they're using the word hairy to describe these creatures, they must be super hairy. Okay? And that's his only connection. That's his only connection in there. Okay? And I'm going, well, that's kind of vague. And where do you get the idea that Leif Erikson recorded that he saw these giant hairy men that towered over him, right? Because I'm not seeing that here in Peter Byrne's description. But he mentioned he got the idea from reading Samuel Eliot Morrison's account, right? So I did some research to find out who Samuel Eliot Morrison is or was. And he was a PhD. He was a naval historian, and he wrote a lot of books about naval history, including books about the first voyages to North America. All right. And so I went on to Amazon and I got myself a little book. Actually, it's a huge book. And it is Samuel Eliot Morrison, The European Discovery of America. All right. So this is the book that Peter Byrne read to get his idea that Leif had encountered Bigfoot. All right. So I went to it and I found this selection here where it says, here is the first contact of Europeans with American Aborigines, whom they called Skrellrings. Okay, or Skrellings. It is a word of contempt meaning barbarians, weaklings, or perhaps even pygmies. Pygmies. And it is still a matter of dispute whether those hardy natives who eventually succeeded in driving the Norsemen out were Indian or Eskimo, and if Eskimo, were they the Dorset or the Tunit? All right, so if we go back to Sam Elliott's book here, it specifically calls them weaklings or pygmies as a translation. Okay, so that's a far cry from the blog post where it says huge, hulking, smelling beasts, right? That it clearly said is distinctly different from the Indians. But if we go back to the source material here, it's telling us the exact opposite, right? It's actually saying that this was their name for the Aborigines, for the indigenous people. And that it says it could possibly be translated as weakling or pygmies. Right? So this is really, it's really important, guys, to, when you hear a story, research what you can on it. And then find out what's really going on. Because we can take it for gospel truth, but as we're seeing here, it's not even close to the same thing. And that's why I call this an urban legend, because of how it's built and developed, right? But that's not the only passage that this comes up with. All right, there's another group here. So at this point, Leaf had traveled around to a couple different areas, landed in an area they called Hop or Hope. Okay. And then it says, after 2 weeks at Hope, they had a visit from the Skrellings in kayaks, making what the Norsemen interpreted as peace gestures. So they raised a white shield in reply, and the natives, described as horribly ugly, hairy, and swarthy, with great black eyes, departed after sampling the milk of the Norsemen's cows and being given a few strips of red cloth. Okay, that's the only other mention of the Skrellings in Samuel Elliott's book. So clearly he's describing a human tribe. They came in kayaks, they were trading, for food and cloth and stuff like this. So going back to that book, I don't even see how Peter Barron could read those passages and then say, oh, well, he said hairy, so therefore it could be Bigfoot. That's not, to me, that's not a logical leap, right? Are you with me on that, Grizzly? What do you think?
As soon as you said 2015, I knew where this was going.
Right, but again, I'm a researcher, so I have to check it out. That's what we got to do, right? And if you notice, several of those passages between the two books were written in that blog post, right? So again, they talk about huge hairy men, or the dark eyes, or swarthy, they specifically said. Like, I have to wonder, did they read this material but just decided to push this other idea anyway and call it the first recorded thing of Bigfoot? Because obviously when you go back to it, it's not at all. Okay. But because it's me and I researched down the rabbit holes, I wanted to find out what the real source material was. And the real source material is found in this book here. This is called the Vinland Sagas. This is currently the most accurately translated work of the Greenland Saga and Eric the Red Saga. This is translated by PhDs in Norse history and Old Norse terminology. And they translated to the most direct English translation that they could. And like the first half of the book is all about their process, how they did it, when there was discrepancies, how they dealt with the discrepancies. It talks about how they managed to translate it, what they used to believe about the sagas, and what they came to believe now with further study, and all that kind of stuff. So really interesting, very well done. And they had this part where they compared Eric the Red saga, when that's referring to Eric the Red, which is Leif Erikson's father, and the saga of the Greenlanders. Okay, they're kind of tell the same story, but from different perspectives. It is how it kind of phrases out. And they have this part where they compare stories that are in both of the sagas and how they kind of differ a little bit. And I thought this was really interesting. So for for Eric the Red saga, it says here they met the natives, and this is just a summary. So this isn't actually what's written in the saga, but a summary. Here they met the natives, Skraelings, and Karl Sefni and his men traded with them, selling them red cloth for pieces of skin. Karl Sefni prevents his men from selling their weapons, and a bull eventually scares the natives away. The natives fight Karl Sefni and his men, and they flee, but the pregnant Freydis scares the natives away by baring her breast to them. The natives find a dead man with an iron axe in his head, pick up the axe, and try it successfully on wood, but when it breaks on stone, they throw it away. On his way back, Karl Sefni kills 5 natives who are sleeping in the skin snacks who fed on blood and marrow. Okay. Now, it specifically calls these natives Skraelings, and in the description, they are the indigenous people. They're the natives. They're the people that were already there in 1000 B or AD when they landed there. And it talks about they were trading for cloth and milk, and how they fought with them, and eventually they killed them. And when it says blood and marrow, there's a note that specifically says this is probably what we refer to in culture as pemmican. And if you don't know what pemmican is, it's like a trail ration kind of food, and it's melted down fat or taro, and it's blended with dried and ground up meat. And the fat acts as a preservative. Sometimes they'll add dried berries to it, but it's like trail food for them. It's like a beef jerky. It's their version of an energy bar, and it lasts forever without refrigeration, and it provides extreme protein and nutrition. So that's what they're talking about there. So that's from Eric the Red saga. Now, if we go to the saga of the Greenlanders, it describes this meeting a little differently. It says, after one winter, they became aware of natives who turned out to be afraid of Karl Sefni's bull. They traded with the natives who offered furs and wanted weapons in exchange, which Karl Sefni forbids. Gudrid gives birth to Snorri and sees a phantom. Karl Sefni plans to use their bull to scare off the natives. They attack, many natives die, and one of them tries an iron axe on one of his companions and kills him. Their chief picks it up and throws it into the sea. The following spring, Karl Sefni decides to return to Greenland. Okay, so it's the same incidences, just described a little differently. And that kind of sums up how it is. But again, with the translations and everything, we're seeing that they are specifically referring to them as human natives. It's the indigenous population. Has nothing to do with Bigfoot. There's no description of them being like a Bigfoot at all. And we go on to find the specific passages, and it's the same thing. It talks about more specifically how it happened, where their first run-in with the Skraelings. They noticed 9 covered boats. They were hide-covered boats. There was people in them, waved wooden poles, and they made a swishing sound as they turned them around sunwise. And so they had these big wooden poles, and they spun them sunwise, which I'm guessing is, from east to west. And they made a specific sound. And they're going, what does that mean? And they're going, we think it's a sign of peace. So they rowed towards them. They were astonished at the sight of them as they landed on shore. They were short in height, with threatening features and tangled hair on their heads. Their eyes were large and their cheeks were broad. They stayed there a while marveling and then rode away. So again, they're describing them as short. and the hair on their head was tangled, so they were hairy, right? And so we're seeing these descriptions. Where's my other one at? Here's one, a different version from the saga of the Greenlanders. And it says, as they headed back to the ship, they saw 3 hillocks on the beach inland from the cape. Upon coming closer, they saw they were 3 hide-covered boats with 3 men under each of them. They divided their forces and managed to capture all of them except one who escaped with his boat. They killed the other 8 and went back to the cape. On surveying the area, they saw a number of hillocks further up the fjord and assumed them to be settlements. So in every one of these encounters, they're describing natives. They're describing the tribe that already lived there. And as you can see, Skraelings, which in this book they just translate as native, Skraelings is not something clearly distinct and different from the natives as it claimed in that blog post. Right? It is the actual word for natives that they're using, Skraeling. And we'll talk about the actual how it's defined here in just a second. And here's the story where after the first winter passed and summer came, they became aware of the natives, the Skraeling. A large group of men came out of the woods close to where the cattle were pastured. The bull began bellowing and snorting very loudly. This frightened the natives, who ran off with their burdens, which included fur pelts, sables, and all kinds of skins. Then they headed for Karlsefni's farm and tried to get into the house. But Karlsefni had the door defended. Neither group understood the language of the other. The natives then set down their packs and opened them, offering their goods, preferably in exchange for weapons, but Karlsefni forbade the men to trade their weapons. He sought a solution by having the women bring out milk and milk products. Once they saw these products, the natives wished to purchase them and nothing else. The trading with the natives resulted in them bearing off their purchases in their stomachs, leaving their packs and skins with Karlsefni and his companions. And this done, they departed. So it goes on to tell a couple more encounters. And then the last time there was one of the natives got killed because he tried to take the weapons for the trading. And so one of the Norsemen killed him for trying to steal the weapons. And then they come back again with a huge force. And then there's a big fight. And the Norsemen won, but they decided it wasn't worth them for him. So in the spring, they left. Okay. And that's directly from the original 13th and 14th century sagas written by the Norsemen about their own history. There is nothing in there at all whatsoever about encountering anything that could be described as a Bigfoot. It's just not there. So basically, I think what happened was like a game of telephone, right? Where we have the original encounters. We have Samuel Eliot, who read the encounters and interpreted them the way he did. And he described Skellring as being barbarians and all that, and super hairy and all this. Then we have Peter Burns saying, oh, hairy. And if the Norsemen are calling something hairy, maybe it's super hairy like a Bigfoot and covered in hair. And then we have somebody writing that blog post who got all kinds of facts wrong, but picking up on where, and even Peter Burns said they're more likely to be Indians, but what if? He was simply posing a what if question. And then somebody took that blog post and wrote how it was a factual account that Leif Erikson in 986 saw Bigfoot with his men multiple times. And as we can see, that's just not true. It is completely false. So whenever you hear somebody saying, oh, the first encounter was Leif Erikson, you know it's not true, and they never looked it up. They never bothered to check it out. It's completely and utterly false. They never reported that.
Goes to
show, guys. That's it. And that's what I do when I get bored. When I do research, that's how I do it. But what I found interesting was Skellring. That was an interesting word. And so I did some research just specifically on skull ring. So a lot of times we're seeing it in these books and stuff. It translates to barbarian or heathen. Okay. But I found that translation is modern Norse translation. But in 1000 AD, they were using Old Norse, not modern Norse. Okay. So in Old Norse, the original meaning of the word, they don't really know, but it sounds a lot like the word used for screaming or shrieking or shouting, like a scream. Or it could mean scrawny, or also it's similar to the root word for hide. Okay. So if we look at the descriptions of the Indians, if we think of the word scream, well, it said in the books how when the Indians attacked, they were shrieking and they were screaming. It also said scrawny, where it did describe some of the Indians as smaller than them and not as big and not as strong. Or the word hides, which could refer to them wearing the animal pelts or from them trading the hides and skins. So the word skraeling is what they're saying in Old Norse was more of just a descriptive term that meant any of the Indians, any of the Aborigines, any of the indigenous people that they came across. It was a generic, general term for whoever they found in those lands, is the research that I came up with. And in fact, there is a tribal group, if you research it, in Canada, who actually they are referred to as Skraelings, and their language is a Skraeling base. Now, nowadays they view it contemptuously. They see it as a derogative term, like a lot of First Nations view the word Indian, right? That's not our real name. Don't call us that. And they see the same thing about Skraeling. But the evidence is there with these tribes that that's what they used to be called. And I thought that was really interesting that we can even trace it back to specific tribes nowadays that were originally referred to as Skraelings. So I think to me that's the final like nail in the coffin of this whole idea that Leif Erikson had the first written recorded encounter of Bigfoot. And so now we can lay that to rest. When you hear it, say, nope, it's wrong. The research has been done. That's just not true. It is, in fact, a Bigfoot urban legend.
That is correct. It's interesting.
So,
Cliff Jones is asking, has there ever been a report that a Bigfoot has killed a human being?
absolutely. There's been many of them. Grizz and I, we did a show on that a while back. There have been many reports. Now, again, with Bigfoot reports, they're anecdotal, they're unsubstantiated. We can only go by what we are told. But yes, the answer to that is yes. There are multiple reports of Bigfoot ever attacking and killing humans, and very, very aggressively, and usually in very horrible manners.
So, and actually, the expedition, or was it Bigfoot, or what was that one? Alaskan Killer Bigfoot, wasn't it? Did a documentary on that.
Yep, Alaskan Killer Bigfoot in Portlock.
Yeah, Portlock. Yeah.
Rob Moorhead was on that one. That's the village town in Alaska that ended up being completely abandoned. And the story goes was that there was very many negative interactions with a clan of Bigfoot and those villagers in that area. People would go out hunting and go missing. There'd be night raids from the Bigfoot onto the edges of the village. And it got to the point where it was so bad and so many missing people, everybody in the village just decided to abandon it and leave. Is the story behind that one. And that's one I'm also going to try and research to see if I can find actual documentation on all that kind of stuff. Or is that just another Bigfoot urban legend?
I think that's got some validity to it because they have the tribes behind it, and they call it Nakataka, or what do they call it up there?
Nekatonka, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yep.
So, and it's still to this day vacant.
It's still to this day vacant. There's been several
Yes.
teams that have gone out there. The Small Town Monster team went out there. They did a documentary on that, the Alaska Bigfoot. The Alaskan Killer Bigfoot with Ron and those guys went out there. There's been a few teams that have gone out there to check it out, and every one of them says it's a very spooky place. I don't think anybody's ever found specific evidence of Bigfoot, but I know they have found like the abandoned buildings and different things like that in the areas they talked about, and they say there is definitely a very kind of spooky, evil feeling going on in the woods up there. And some of them may have found like some footprints or something, but they haven't had any documented like Bigfoot attacks or sightings while they've been investigating it.
So that's very interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
but yeah. But
Yep.
once you said 2015, I knew exactly where this was going to lead to.
Well, sure. But again, it was one of those ones where we've all heard the story, and most people I've talked to, when I did a poll on it, they said, yeah, the Leif Erikson story. This is the first recorded, Bigfoot encounters. And that's what everybody believes, and everybody knows that. But that's not good enough for me. And then as soon as I heard there was an inkling that it might be false, I had to dig into it. And I had to figure out what was going on there.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I thought so. Any other questions from the audience or any comments on it? Anything that they want to talk about? I thought that would take a lot longer.
That was just interesting when somebody takes the time and goes through the references. Because when you said there was no author on that or no reference, I was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, I think the assumption for me there would be that that blog was probably written by the person that runs Sasquatch Chronicles, because it's the Sasquatch Chronicles blog. So I think when you have a blog, then you assume that the person that has that show has that blog. And I'm not going to say a name or anything, but if you know Sasquatch Chronicles, you know where that came from. And I'm not going to sit here and put out there that this was intentionally false, intentionally misleading, because we don't know. We don't know the intentions behind anything. All we can do is track down the evidence and track down the sources, and so that's what I did.
Who knows? They probably got the information wrong too. So
sure. Well,
I've
just
seen
like
that
Peter,
happen many times.
many times, just like Peter Byron. All he did was hear the word Harry, and all of a sudden he's going, "Oh, I wonder what that means," and then it kind of blew up from there. So
yeah,
I thought that was fascinating. Yeah. Hey, is Jessica in our audience tonight? Did you see a Jessica come across the name?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give a shout out to Jessica because she is one of our listeners that just started listening recently. And she actually met up with me when I went to investigate and check out the Kettle Moraine in Milwaukee. Now, are you familiar with the Kettle Moraine there, Grizzly?
So before you move on to that one, Holly
go ahead.
says that's the one we were taught in school as folklore.
Okay.
So see, look how far that goes back.
So they taught you in school that Leif Erikson had supposedly seen Bigfoot.
So,
and I guess you could call it folklore, but I'm just curious as to how far back. Like, I'm not going to ask you how old you are, but when was that? When did you hear that in school? And was it college level or base level school?
So that's interesting. So
yeah.
I couldn't tell you when I heard it. I know it's been many years ago.
Sure.
So that's very interesting. She says yes. Was it? Hello there, Jennifer. Welcome. That's interesting.
Oh, hey, Jen. Shout out to my girl.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
and
it
goes
was
to show, hello, Overbuilt. Welcome. Elementary in the 80s.
Okay. So that would have been, about a decade after Peter Byron, I can never say his name, wrote his book. I mean, he wrote that one in the 70s.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, Rev, welcome to the show, everybody. That's just interesting. It just goes to show that you got to be careful and
Mm-hmm.
what you listen to and where you get your information from.
Yep.
So
And how you repeat it as fact, right? That's a big one because I almost used it as a fact in my own presentation. And I have seen other speakers present it as fact, and they're like Bigfoot 101 sections. And so I never questioned it because I just kind of assumed myself that somebody had researched it and have verified it. And so I'm kind of like, why should I go back and redo somebody else's research?
yeah, why reinvent the wheel if it's already moving? It's got spokes on it. I agree with that.
Exactly. Exactly. But now I guess I'm going to have to start questioning more and more stuff. So I've got a few other stories that I'm going to be checking out, like
Well,
the red-headed giants of Lovelock Cave.
and I'll tell you this:
Mm-hmm.
as law enforcement, once you punch a hole in somebody in a
Yep.
court of law, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Once you create a doubt, everything is doubt.
So
Yep.
it's interesting because once you said 2015, and I was trying to do the math because I
Mm-hmm.
know about Leif Erikson in the time frame because
Mm-hmm.
actually they don't know if he landed in North America. They know he landed in Canada.
Well, Canada's
So,
North America.
well,
Yeah.
when we say North America, we're referencing America, the United States,
Right. It's not the
like
US.
Columbus, right? Right.
Right. Yep. Well, yeah, and
So
that's the other thing
there's the
too.
question because he had two sons, which a lot of people don't know, which end up having grandsons, and he
Yep.
followed the family tree. So I know a little bit of history about him.
Yep. Yeah.
So I never looked into it because everybody always used it once again as reference, and
Mm-hmm.
I never dived into it, and I just let it go. I was like, okay, so
Yeah.
yeah,
And even today, there's still some dispute of where because they mentioned three or four different islands or land places that they named over from the characteristics of the land when they went there. And by using that, they have pinpointed areas that are possible areas for where the landings were. One of them being like Baffin Island, and one of them being along the St. Lawrence River and stuff like that, just based on the descriptions of what they found there and what the land was like and stuff like that. So most of that tends to be up on the Canadian side of everything.
Cliff Jones.
But
Has
it
there
also
been
talks
any?
about,
Oh, I'm sorry.
oh, go ahead.
Cliff Jones, has there
No, go
been
ahead.
any inquest, and he's from UK or England, then that's what inquest means, reports on being killed by Bigfoot. So over here today, we have which we call reports or investigations, but
Mm-hmm.
they are commonly known as animal attacks, bear attacks, or wild animals. They're not going to come
Mm-hmm.
out, Cliff, and say, Mr. Justin Decker, age 32, was killed by
I wish.
8.5 foot, 700
Mm-hmm.
pound blonde Sasquatch. And no, they're not going to tell you that. They will tell you that he was attacked by a grizzly bear or a wild animal. And the police
Unknown animal. Yep.
use code words for cryptids, especially Bigfoot, as bears and so forth. So that's how they do things in America.
Mm-hmm.
It's a secret uh, radio code word, and the agencies, the Fish and Wildlife, the Department of Natural Resources, they know they exist. They know they have them in their forestries and state parks,
Mm-hmm.
national parks. Uh, it's interesting how they either let places grow up or overgrown and keep people out, or they
Mm-hmm.
burn places down to move them away, or put up restrictions and sanction places where you cannot go.
Yep.
So yes, they do know they're there. So that's how they do things over here. So it's very interesting.
Absolutely.
And now they do have them in UK as well. So
Yep.
don't think you don't have Bigfoot. which they call them over there. What is it? What do they call it? Woodsman?
The woodsman or the woodwoes?
Woodwoes. Yes,
The
thank you.
woodwoes, the green men. There's a lot of UK history referring to the green men and woodwoes and
That
wild
is
men of the
correct.
woods. Yep.
Yeah, they actually have them incorporated in their old churches, holding
Yep.
clubs and so
Yep.
forth, and carved in churches.
Yep.
ERAV also believe it's more comfortable arena to speak to do so. The meaning of seeing or hearing of stories in the subject. Yeah, a lot of people are. It's interesting. And over in UK and England and all that, the rich history of it
Yeah.
and their culture. It's been there for centuries,
Yep.
and you cannot deny it.
Nope.
I mean, you're not going to come to America Church and see a Bigfoot carved into a wall or a statue holding a club.
Mm-mm.
Do we have reports of Bigfoot with clubs? Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. Yep.
So the story is not far fetched when we see statues over across the pond with them, and we still get reports to this day. People seeing Bigfoot with trees and stumps and homemade clubs,
Yep.
whatever
Branches and stuff.
branches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So very interesting topic. Good question, Mr. Jones. Good question. I'll give you a round of applause on that one.
Yeah.
Hello, Carol. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you. I'll give you a round of applause too there. Nice to have you there, Carol Garcia. Welcome, welcome. But no, it is. It's very fascinating. And fortunately enough, when I was on the PD, we didn't have any Squatch encounters. Dogman, thank goodness.
Good thing.
Yeah, right. I mean, especially out in the county. Now, do we have encounters? Or probably, but I mean, the locals never probably spoke of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
the dates belong with kin stuff. Odd, right? The stuff adds right up. Yeah, it does. Once you dive into something and research something like Decker did, it all comes to light. Yeah, I mean, you're taught, and this is going to show, especially in report writing and in college, that if you reference something in your report writing or your report, a book
Yeah.
report, essay, or not, you have to leave where you got that reference.
Yep.
The author, the wherever you have to reference that
Yep.
subject. So, and that's when he said 2015. I was like, yeah, no, okay, right there. Here we go. We're going downhill into the ditch, ladies and
Oh
gentlemen.
yeah.
We have protectors of the land in UK. They're normally about 7 foot high. We're seen in dark cloaks. Yes, that is true, Mr. Jones.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Ira. I greatly appreciate that. Round of applause for you too. Thank you. But no, it's just interesting because, my younger days, all my officers, especially on county, always asked me, what are you going to do if you come across one? First thing I said, I'm going to take it out. And they were like, what? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to run over the damn thing. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to take my patrol car. And they're like, you're crazy. I'm like, you damn right I am. And when we went in the woods before after people, they're like, well, I'm going to drop it. Now today, no, I would never harm one. I'm a no harm, no kill person when it comes to these creatures or things, whatever they are. But 20 something years ago, whatnot, I was younger and more stouter and whatnot. Things are a lot different. Life's changed, but
Yeah.
it's just amazing. It really is. The prophetic with
Yeah.
Bo, Pony, and Donnie, Clemente, Peruski, the video, the end time stuff. Very good video on Rumble. Yeah, I heard about that overbuilt. Thanks for referencing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Population was much smaller, less sightings.
Well,
Go ahead.
I understand what you're saying there, but the difference is we also have to look at population trends where right now the trend is for big cities. Most of our population, yeah, it's increased, but most of us live in big cities,
That is
right?
correct.
Big population centers. So back then, yes, there was less population, but there was more people out in the wilderness areas where we would have had the encounters. I personally don't believe we are having more encounters. I personally believe encounters and being able to report encounters is easier and faster. So we're hearing of more encounters because it's easier to spread information in this day and age, where back in the day it wasn't. And also looking at the fact that back in the day, you didn't know Bigfoot wasn't something you were supposed to see. If you saw this large hairy creature in the woods, it was just something you experienced. And you may or may not even tell somebody about it, not because you're trying to hide it, but because it's just another encounter of something. Like if you happen to run across a bear or if you happen to run across a mountain lion, it was just a natural part of your world. Just like you wouldn't think to report that I saw a big old moose in the woods, because to them it was just part of the woods. So I really don't believe we're having more or less encounters than what they used to. I just think we now have the ability to hear about people's encounters more. Does that make sense?
Roger Blair. I think Native Americans, Northwestern America, has masks and totem poles representing Bigfoot. Yes, they do.
Absolutely.
So does
Absolutely, they
British
do.
Columbia, and in Canada
Yep.
they do as well. And
hmm
was it South America? They have some too.
I'm not familiar with any totem poles in South America, but they definitely have them down
There's
there.
a yeah. I have to
Yeah.
check on that one. I live out in the sticks of Eastern Kentucky, Roger Blair, just like my family is for generations. And Roger, speaking of that, for generations, we also learn over the years, in the past 15 to 20 years too, Roger, that people in your stature also has been raised alongside of Bigfoot,
hmm
the family, with
Absolutely.
generations, where grandchildren are coming forward and was told, hey, my grandpa told me when I was 6 or 7, do not hunt on this side of the farm.
Yep.
That we had to stay on. We were never told why until I had my encounter when I was 10 or 12.
hmm
And I got in trouble because I was not supposed to go over there. And then we got along and we had this around, and then we're like, what? And now we're getting all these encounters from the 60s, the 70s,
hmm
the 80s. The people are coming out of the
Yep.
closet and saying, I'm not alone. I had
I,
one too.
yep. I
So
I got a gentleman in East Tennessee on the Nolichucky River Basin. And he's an older gentleman now, and I'm old, but he's older than me. And he talks about his grandfather's property in East Tennessee and how they had a clan of Bigfoot living on the property. And every now and then they would see them or experience it. He tells a story of when he was about 8 or 9. He woke up to some noise one night and he went and looked, and his grandfather was on the back porch, and there was a large Bigfoot standing off of the porch. And he said to him it sounded like they were talking, like he could hear some voices. And then he got up and then he saw it and went back to bed, and he talked to his grandpa about it, and his grandpa was just like, yeah, they come up sometimes. And they ask for stuff for trade. And he swears by that story to this day. And this guy still has that family property, and he still goes out there. He doesn't live on the property, there's not a house there anymore, but he still goes out there and he sends me pictures of footprints and tree breaks and rock stacks and all this other kind of stuff. And that was just somebody that I met talking to in East Tennessee. So
see,
the reports are there. Yeah.
Roger just says my great aunt on my dad's side would tell a Bigfoot type creature. See,
Yep.
overbuilt. I'm just south of you, very near Knoxville, Tennessee. River Grizzly. Grew up
Mm-hmm.
in Morgan County. That's nearest, I think, to McCreek County, Kentucky. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Overbuilt. So
Overbuilt. I
yeah,
just came out of the Knoxville area. I was living just outside of Gatlinburg.
so I mean the encounters are there, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep.
Whether we want to believe them or not, they are there. They
Yep.
exist. Uh, we cannot turn an eye to it. People are coming forward that are our age or older. There are people that right now that are going deer hunting that never experienced one of these creatures, that are
Mm-hmm.
becoming believers at this moment in the morning. and their world is being turned upside down, because this is when we start getting reports that people's life is just ruined.
Absolutely.
So, and it is real, and people that, whether they're, how do you want to say, neurologists, district attorneys, judges,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, high-ranking officials that will come to you in secret and be like, I've been watching your shows because of, and they tell you what happened to them.
Yep. And they're afraid to
So,
tell anybody because they don't want their reputation ruined. They don't want it to get out. They don't want people to think they're crazy, and so they just don't talk about it. But you know what
uh,
I find is that they always have a sense of relief when they finally find somebody that they can tell.
yeah.
It's really, really crazy. It's awesome.
Truthy Ruthie, my father encountered Sasquatch in Stearns, Kentucky, 1978. See, what I say, 60s,
Mm-hmm.
70s, and 80s.
Yep. Definitely
But
starting to come out more.
but let me tell you something. When and I said this on a few other shows, with that spinal cord implant that I'm going up for the
Yep.
trials, right? I got to go through this process, and one of the processes is all this blood work and testing and psych evaluation. I
Oh
love
man,
those.
that's gonna be
And
fun.
I already did it. I already did
Oh,
it.
did you?
And
You did
soon,
already did that
yeah.
one? Okay.
So as soon as I got on the phone, I was like, "Guess what?" She's like, "What?" I said, "I believe in Bigfoot." And she's like, "Do what?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Are you being serious?" And I was like, "Uh-oh." She goes, "What about aliens?" And I'm like, "No, no, that's too far." I'm like, "I got
Nah,
you."
just fooling.
Psych. And she's like, "You had me there for a minute." And I was like, "Oh Lord." I was like, "Boy, I better straighten up right now." 45 minutes later, she told me I passed. I was like, "Woo." I was like, "I about ruined that one." So yeah, yeah. You don't want to mess with the psychiatrist when you're going up for an eval like that.
Nope.
Yeah, she was not one of those ones you can joke with. That's for sure. Well, I had to think quick and act fast on my feet. Cliff Jones. There are many out there that I've seen, but scared to share because of fear of being Rick. You're damn right, Cliff. And that's
Absolutely.
what's sad with the world today. You can't be yourself.
Hmm.
You can't share your story because other people will judge you and what they think of you. It's sad. Overbuilt. I haven't seen a squatch yet or any other critter such as dogman. I hope grizzly. I don't run into a dog lady in rut. I knew you was gonna come up with something. I
Hmm.
never seen a dogman, ladies and gentlemen.
No.
Yeah, I'm up, Carol, for a spinal cord stimulator. Yes, I'm going through the final stages for the trial period to lead into the trial, to get the trial leads and the trial period, so I can get it permanently implanted. I hope. Hopefully, that gives me some, because they thought I broke my back in 2019 on duty. Truthy Ruthie, that's why I come here to talk the talk. Yes.
Yep, that's why we're
We
here.
do not. Oh, Carol, you have one. Please tell me it really works for you. I hope it really works for you. So I'll do anything to get rid of the pain. I have a dog, man. Truthy, you can keep your dog, man, on a leash, a short leash. I mean,
Nope.
I really, I don't fear much in life. I know I get scared easy, ladies and gentlemen, and that has changed over the years. I used to not be afraid of anything. I used to be the first one in the house on a search warrant, even with my rank. And they were like, you don't have to go. I'm like, I want to go. If they're going, I'm going.
Right.
And I wasn't afraid of no man or no person, no anything. But dog man, yeah, Truthy, I couldn't. I don't know what I would do. The guy on the bicycle enough about gave me a heart attack, because I really did thought a ghost was running at me, and look what happened. And now, if that was a bad guy and I was in uniform or off duty or something, I would have went after him in a heartbeat. That, not even
Whole
thinking.
different story. Mm-hmm.
Right. But I'm glad it's working, and that gives me some reassurance, because
Good.
I've seen a lot of pros, but I see a lot of cons.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that gives me some reassurance, Carol. So I'm right through the final stages. I got all my blood work, my testing done. So I'm just waiting on the insurance to do their final thing for the trial. So yes.
Hey, Truthy Ruthie, find me on Facebook, and I want to talk to you about your story. Make
There you
make sure you
go.
message me. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Carol says I was walking with the cane, almost in a wheelchair for the implant. Now I can walk. Well, I'm good. I'm so
Awesome.
glad to hear that, Carol. It
That's
gives me some
fantastic.
reassurance that it is. I'm glad to hear that for you. So that's good. Roger Blair, my back hurts 24/7. Doctor says one of those discs in my lower back's deteriorated to the point it's almost gone. Oof, brother. Let me tell you something. I used to,
Mm-hmm.
when I was younger. I'm not that old. I ain't gonna fool you. I'm not bald. I just shaved my head. But when I was younger, I didn't think anything about back pain. I thought, they say, you wussy. And then when I hurt myself, I was like, what in the world? And people live like this? This is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And but what's sad, and I'm not going to get on the spiel because you're all going to make me
Mm-hmm.
preach, but you know, they got medicine, but they won't give the right people the medicine to help them, but they'll give anyways. I'll stop. Thank you, Carol.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you. I want to keep my mouth shut, because you're going to get me started on Kentucky opiates, and I'm going to get
Mm-hmm.
flagged on some platforms. And
Mm-hmm.
but anyways, but thank you, Carol. That gives me some reassurance, and I appreciate the prayers. Yes, I'm
Yep.
53.
It's awesome.
I'm damn. How old am I?
How
I
old
got
are you, Grizz?
CRS. I was born in 74, so 74. So that makes him what, 48, 49,
48,
49,
49? Well, I'm not going to
48.
say how old I am, but I will say tomorrow is my birthday.
Oh, it is.
Yes, tomorrow is my actual birthday. So uh,
Well, happy birthday.
thank you. I'm not a big one to
Happy
celebrate my birthday, but
birthday to you. Happy
oh no.
birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. Decker. Happy birthday to you.
Well, thank you.
Anyways, yes, I had to do that. But
Appreciate it.
main
I
thing
really
stands,
do.
yeah. I appreciate that, sending prayers and stuff. I had to sing him happy birthday. I mean, it's only like not even 54 minutes away. But yes, everybody, here comes all the birthdays and laughs. E-Rev's like, something's wrong with him. Now, if I would have
Oh,
done
of
that with
course.
my psychiatrist, she would have filmed me. I really thought she was going to flunk me. If she would have not told me I would have passed, I would have been like freaking out until I would have found out. But the good thing is that she liked me, sweet angelic voice. Cliff, I love you too. The good thing is that after the testing was done, she's like, I want to ask you a personal question. I was like, I'm going to say no to everything. And she goes, I do admire. And I was like, uh-oh, she's going to ask me for something. And she goes, my heart goes out to a lot of people and first responders. And I was like, huh. And she says, I'm dedicating pro bono to help people with issues. And I think that you and I were supposed to meet. And I was like, uh-oh. And she's like, you want to be a part of this plan that I'm working on to help other first responders with mental health issues? And I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Heck yeah.
So I was like, put me down. I was like, yeah. So So we're gonna get together and talk about some stuff, and maybe make some difference in people's lives. So not only in the cryptid world,
Awesome. Yeah.
but also in the mental awareness, because there's some issues out there. Cliff,
Oh, yeah.
hopefully I didn't make you cry. Look, somebody gave us a smiley, a huggy heart, a care emoji. Oh,
Aw.
but I'm glad you brought that topic up today, because if you didn't bring that subject up, I would have kept assuming
Mm-hmm.
that was actual gospel,
Mm-hmm.
and I would have never second guessed that, because everybody quotes that.
Yep,
Uh,
exactly.
and some of the people on TV
Yep.
does it too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting to know that. So once again, it's
Yep.
good to know, because I tell you what, that would be embarrassing, is to be up
Right.
on stage and giving a lecture, and somebody be like and raise their hand, be like, "You're wrong, Grizzly." I'd be like, "What do you
Exactly.
mean I'm wrong?" That's
Everybody knows it.
yeah, and I'm like, "No," and I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to get into a debate, because I won't have nothing to back it up. Because if you notice and how I do things, I always use things as reference, especially in
Yep.
my cold cases, statues,
Yep.
ordinances, and so forth. So it's very good that you did that. So
Yep.
I applaud you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Very
did
good.
find, as of right now, the oldest recorded Bigfoot evidence was from 1811 from an English explorer, and they found footprints. And they recorded the footprints. And as of right now, that is considered the first actual documented evidence of Bigfoot in North America is 1811. But I'm going to keep digging as part of my projects and part of my speeches and books to find out if there's anything that we can prove in the North America before that 1811 point. So I'm going to keep digging and see what I can find out. And as I do, I'll bring stuff forward to you guys and kind of let you know what's going on with it.
Okay, so I'm gonna help you here with your research.
All right.
So Russell Easterbrooks,
Mm-hmm.
he is an author. He has been on several of my other shows as
Okay.
my co-host, and he is writing a book, and Ron Moorhead is writing the foreword, or has wrote
Oh,
the
nice.
foreword into his book.
Okay.
And he went into Americans' history
Mm-hmm.
from the gold rush and the paper mill and the
Okay.
movement out west, and did research and how that affected Bigfoot.
Nice.
And yeah, so look him up on Facebook, Russell
Yep.
Easterbrooks, or
I will.
or in our Facebook groups,
Yep.
and very easy to find. Let him know that I sent you, and he'll be more than happy to talk to you.
Nice.
And he has a lot of references, and he has done a lot of research over the years. He actually has permission to use stock photos from the paper mill companies,
Okay.
copyrighted photos in writing to use in his
Nice.
books.
Nice.
When the logging companies, when they were cutting down the forests and all that, I mean, yeah, he's
Mm-hmm.
really done his research, and he'll talk to you about smallpox and how all, and yeah, very interesting.
Good. I'll definitely have to
So
check it out. Definitely. I'll look them up.
yeah, yes. So well, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully Mr. Decker has a good evening tonight and a happy birthday, and
Thank you.
from coast to coast and around the world, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you on the next show. Take care.
We'll see you
Bye
guys.
bye.